What's up, guys? So today on the podcast, Eugene and I are going to talk about the development of how to make an unstoppable technique. Now, obviously, unstoppable is a very loaded word in jiu-jitsu because ultimately there's someone who's going to stop your techniques, right? I've got some techniques in my game that I would consider unstoppable in some fashion. I can use them on just about anybody that's comparable to my skill. But obviously, if I go up against like Hodger Gracie, it's not going to be so unstoppable. But in the confines of your space, your gyms, the people that you're competing against that are at the same skill level, basically how to make a technique essentially unstoppable to where if you can get to that one specific position that you need to, that technique's going to happen, right? So we're going to talk about how to do that, how to develop it, and some of the ways that I like to do it. And hopefully this episode is useful to you. Guys, big thanks to our sponsors that help make the podcast happen. You can check out Charlotte's Web. Charlotte's Web is the CBD that I use, is the CBD of my choice. If you've ever been interested in trying CBD, they have a myriad of different products, everything from the tinctures that you're probably familiar with, where you just put the oil, on your under your tongue or in your mouth. They have gummies, which are they're dangerous. They're super delicious.
Yummy.
They're really good. The lemon, it's like the lemon ball or something lemon blueberry or something. They're the one with the vitamin D. Those suckers are just like candies. Very dangerous, but delicious and effective. They also have balms and rubs that you can rub into your muscles for that to get very specific site-specific relief. And again, a lot of really cool products. And so if you'd like to try out any of their stuff, you can go to charlottesweb.com/jiu-jitsu. And you can pick up any of the products that they have available. And again, that helps support the podcast and you get some really good stuff into your body to help you out with your supplementation, recovery, and in fighting off inflammation in your body. Also, thanks to our sponsor, Matt at Epic Roll. EpicRollBJJ.com is the website. And if you're in the mood or if you're in the market for any sort of jiu-jitsu gear, rash guards, gis, shorts, t-shirts, whatever, you can check out his website. If you've ever watched one of my YouTube episodes and you've seen me in a jiu-jitsu related t-shirt that isn't mine, it's probably Matt's. I really like his stuff. I like his t-shirts. I find them interesting. I think the designs are cool. And some of them are fun. Like he's got the ones where he's got like the definitions of the particular moves. Those are favorites of mine. I like wearing those out because most people look at them and they don't even know what you're talking about. Like I remember wearing the Kimura one, and some guy was like, "What is a Kimura?" And we're here in Kentucky, so in where I live, it's more on, they say, like you're starting to get into the more rural parts of the city in the area, and so you get some guys in there like, "Man, what's that Kimura? What's that?" And then talk to him about like UFC stuff. You have to bridge the gap there.
Right.
But it's a fun icebreaker if you want it. But anyway, he's got some cool stuff. So if you'd like to check out any of his stuff, you can go to his website at epicrollbjj.com. The promo code is Jiu-Jitsu. You save 15% on the order, and you get yourself some excellent gear, merch, or anything Jiu-Jitsu related. Also, I did my rash guard and shorts order with him just recently. And again, I did that because I like his stuff. I'm a fan of it. I used it for a long time, and so I was happy to put my name on that kind of on his products and do a collaboration with him. So again, that's how strongly I feel about the products. So check them out. And guys, getting into this podcast today, we're going to talk about developing techniques. If you would like, it's really good. It would be helpful to look at it if you want it. If you go to my website at jujitsu.net and then /join, JOIN, I have some ebooks on there that I give away for free when you join my email list. Now, when you join the email list, one of the ebooks that you will get is it's called Focus Jiu-Jitsu, which is basically drilling strategies. Many of these drilling strategies are not what you might consider drilling. They're more of what I consider active drilling. And for a lot of people this is what this episode is going to be a lot about. And for a lot of people who don't have the ability to go to tons of open mats and drill, or don't have the ability to do lots of repetitions with techniques, or simply you don't want to because you find it boring. Well, then there's other ways to get around it. Because that happens. Bernardo was like this. Bernardo Faria, he does not like to drill techniques. He likes to practice them in rolling. So there are some strategies for all of those different people. And again, you'll get that ebook, Focus Jiu-Jitsu, by joining my email list. And then once you're on my email list, you get an email from me, usually Monday through Friday. And again, you can unsubscribe at any time. Also, if you would like to support the podcast directly, a couple things you can do. There's a few choices you have. One is you can go to whatever podcast app you are listening to us right now. And if there is a way to give us a rating, a positive review, to subscribe, to basically give us a little love in any way, shape, or form, we would appreciate it if you do so. I mean, if you enjoy the podcast and you listen to us every week, then there must be a reason why you're back. And so again, it would take you maybe a minute to do so, and it would mean a lot to us. And it really does help out a lot. It really, it helps out in a big way when it comes to getting our podcast out there and helping the thing grow. So again, we would appreciate if you did it. And if you guys want to check out some extra stuff from the podcast, you can go to the Patreon by going to patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast, along with all the content that we put into the Patreon, which basically typically includes a extra with whatever guests we've had. We always have a little actionable tip from them. Along with that, we have a lot of different episodes that have never released publicly. And there's also some video content in there as well. Along with all that, we're now doing our green room, which basically is a chance to hang out with Eugene and me in a very casual setting before one of the podcasts. You can basically hang out with us, lounge around for a little bit, chat, and just be with us for just a lighthearted conversation before the podcast starts. And if you have a question, obviously you can ask it as well. You can get that by going to patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. So guys, with that said, let's get started with the podcast. All right, guys. So developing an unstoppable technique. Again, big disclaimer there. Unstoppable in relation to you as a person and what you're capable of. Because again, jiu-jitsu is one of those sports where there's in martial arts where there's always someone out there that's better than you. But developing an unstoppable technique, at least to some degree, obviously it's going to begin with very humble beginnings. And then it's going to grow from there. And we're going to give you some strategies and some tools and techniques to make that happen. Eugene, you were talking about a sort of a theory or sort of an explanation of motor learning. What was that?
So I was just kind of Googling around, just trying to get some, just the stages, maybe a better understanding of the stages of learning. And I came upon this summary of Fitz and Posner's 3 stages of motor learning. So this first stage is cognitive, which is basically primarily you're gathering information. The characteristics are large gains, inconsistent performance. So think of a technique in jiu-jitsu. Maybe you're picking up, you're learning a lot, but maybe even improving, but it's inconsistent.
Right. That's very common in the beginning with what we're doing, because think about the inconsistency that you have with techniques and positions in the beginning when you're still gathering information about how they work and how you use them.
Yeah, and then we talk about the associative stage, which is putting actions together. So you now get the gains become smaller, a little bit disjointed on your performance, and there's conscious effort. So I think you're starting to kind of put those things together, but it's still not quite smooth. And definitely takes a lot of effort on your end. It takes time, conscious effort, thinking about what you're doing. But I think you're progressing. Although probably this stage is the one of the least fun stages, I think, because you're small gains.
And that's also probably going to be where you spend most of your time before that technique is really in a good place. Most of our techniques are honestly, I think, in that space because you can only master so much. And the next stage of that is pretty much to me when you started getting into that place of mastery to some degree. And you can only do that with so many techniques. And so a lot of times you find that the techniques that you don't use very often, you often have to exert a lot more energy to use because it's not automatic yet. And along with that, when you're developing a new technique, you understand this as well as I do. When you're developing a technique, you might develop that darn thing for years. Like one of my techniques that I've been developing for a long time, my guard passing to back take with the truck off the double under. That sucker, man, I started using that back in. There's videos of me using it as far back as 2016. And I wasn't able to hit it like smoothly in competition until 2020. Or actually 2019 is when I started using it. That's 3 years of working on a technique. Now, I wasn't working on it every single day, but I was working on it with some regularity. So 3 years with like going down that rabbit hole of making that happen. And so, a lot of times when you're talking about jiu-jitsu, you're playing that long game. And so that's just something to consider with that. So,
and that brings us to the third stage, which is autonomous, which is much time and practice. That's a process, how you get there. A lot of time, a lot of practice on the mats, lots of reps, and the performance seems unconscious, automatic, and smooth. You see that kind of, when you do that truck, that back take, that truck to the back take, it's smooth, right? It's a flowy movement. It just looks like you're just rolling around. There's no disjointedness. It's just like, boom. all of a sudden you're on the back.
Yep.
And it's fun to see that, even experience it in some ways. Like I think that watching you hit it in competition, also feeling you hit it like on me, you see how it works. It's like you're almost like when you develop I guess an automaticity to your movement. There's no pauses, right? One flows straight into the other, and you feel like you're trying to catch up, like you're trying to fight that or defend the inevitable in a way, because when you're in that space and you're moving at this smooth, consistent, there's no breaks, there's really not a chance to catch up, right? And so you're kind of a little bit behind each time, and if you're a little bit behind, you're gonna get your back taken.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you are at that level with the technique and it hits so perfectly and fluidly. I have no better way to describe it than it's almost like, imagine looking at a puzzle, if you've ever put a puzzle together and you're like struggling or whatever, and then you find the perfect piece that you've been missing and you put it right in place and it just slides in. You're like, perfect.
It's a domino effect.
Yeah. I mean, well, it slides in and there's very little effort to it. This is like, with certain techniques that I have in my game, when I hit them, they're like effortlessly. Like I use so little strength to make them work. There's so much timing and execution to them that it really doesn't require a lot of strength to exert to make it happen. And the way that this sort of like stage process, it makes me think of, so I listened to a really good lecture years ago. It was actually, I guess, you could consider like an audio program from Great Courses. And the whole program was about learning. And there was several chapters on motor learning. And I remember the professor, and she was saying that when you learn a technique, let's say that the teacher, the coach, the instructor is teaching a group of people a particular motor pattern, right? Some sort of movement pattern. By the way, when we say motor, and just in case you guys don't understand, that just means movement. Like it's just a fancy way of saying that, right? It makes us feel fancy. But so they teach a certain movement pattern. In the beginning, amongst all the students, there's going to be a wide variation of technique being shown, because there's going to be a lot of inconsistency, because these people are still grasping for how do you do this the right way. They're still gathering enough information to make this thing work. And when we're talking about information too, let's not confuse this with like head information. This isn't like listening to someone talk it out more. When I say information, I'm talking about the raw data that you experience throughout your body, because when you're, think about you obviously can look around and interpret things and think about them, right? But even when you touch something, if I put my hand on the table, I all of a sudden get a sense of information coming from this table. Like right now, my desk is kind of cold, and I can feel that it's made of glass on the top, right? So by touching this, the senses, I get this information from it. And a lot of what we do in jiu-jitsu is based on that sensory that comes from our body, not necessarily from the head. So understand, when we say information, we're getting it, it's not just from the head. And so then eventually, through further training, you get to your associative stage where there's uniformity amongst the group. So basically the students have then taken the information and they're able to replicate what their coach has shown to a degree where they're able to do it now pretty routinely and pretty like consistently amongst the board. And then eventually there's variation, and the variation only emerges once it's been pushed into automaticity. So basically, once the technique is automatic, then you're able to open up this new area of thinking to where you can go, oh, okay. So that's like, now here's another way I can do this. Because, when you watch a lot of jiu-jitsu practitioners and you watch a lot of techniques evolve, they tend to evolve once you've gotten past what your coach showed you. And then you get past all that. And then all of a sudden there's this other area where then you start to fine tune these techniques and find new details as you continue to push the envelope with that particular movement. And we'll get into this a little bit more throughout the episode.
Yeah. So those 3 stages is kind of a good way. And I've never heard of them before. Like I was just looking them up, just a good way to categorize those. And I think when we think about like automaticity, it's almost like the brain is not necessarily, it's just like, it's like when you get in your car, sometimes like you'll get in your car and you'll drive and all of a sudden you're at the gym. You're like, well, how the heck did I get here? Like, I didn't even realize I was driving. You just you've done it so much and you're so It doesn't mean you're not paying attention. You're
Mhm.
observant and you're aware, but it just doesn't take that mental effort as it used to. So like I think that um in jujitsu as well, I think there can be a mental fatigue. I think that can come with it. You know, if I'm learning like a new technique or I'm really trying to like hone in on like leg locks or entries or something kind of intricate, I'm not only physically exhausted after training, I'm also mentally exhausted
Yeah.
because it just takes a lot. And even sometimes, like a tournament,
Mhm.
that'll be mentally exhausting as well. Just the preparation and the just the awareness you have to have and just being in the right place and focusing on what you're doing. I think like there's a lot of uh, mental energy that goes into that.
Yeah.
But I think like the development of a technique like we'll talk about is just so it is take time and it's
Mhm.
not always fun and there's a lot of roadblocks, but like those roadblocks are what help you get it to where it's in many cases can be unstoppable.
Yep. Going back to your car analogy, I think that's a good one. The way that I view it is your technique is in that automatic place when, let's say, for instance, you're driving your car and all of a sudden a couple hundred yards in front of you, you see a big wreck. There's debris everywhere, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
In that moment, when you're coming into a wreck and you basically there's cars strewn about and there's mayhem and carnage everywhere. Okay. I'm trying to give people a mental image. Imagine like fire popping out of stuff and imagine cars strewn about where you're going to have to, you're going to have to move very quickly to avoid getting into a wreck yourself. When you approach this situation, if you were to sit there and start to think logically about, okay, what steps do I need to take? It's going to be too late. You're going to wreck your car. You're going to hurt yourself. But because in the situation, because we're so in tune with the automobile, we begin to steer, hit the brakes, and bob and weave and get ourselves out of that situation without consciously thinking about it. And it's usually only after it's said and done that we're like, okay, what just happened? And a lot of times when you become very, very skilled with a technique, you will find that when you're in the middle of a really hard roll or a competition match or a fight, it's only after you've done the thing that you realize what you did. I remember having
Mm.
this experience. I was I was on the YouTube channel recently, and someone had posted up one of my old fights that's kind of lurking out on the internet, and it was a fight where I did a corkscrew armbar against a guy. Now in the fight, I never once thought corkscrew armbar. Now, strangely enough, we had drilled the corkscrew armbar a bunch about a week before during class, but it wasn't something I honestly normally used. And I remember that in the fight, I was trying to take his back and I just fell off and it fell right into place. And I remember as he was flipping over, and because he was forced to roll, as he was flipping over and tapping at the same time because I had his arm extended, I realized I had the corkscrew armbar.
Mm.
It was only afterwards. And this is typically how this thing works. Like where with you were talking about the back take I did. When I hit that back take, I almost hit it after the fact, especially in the middle of a really good scramble. So let's kind of dive into it real quick and talk about developing this stuff. And again, if you guys have my drilling ebook, there's some good references there. But again, obviously, your techniques begin in the very, very humble stages of you simply do repetitions of a movement and you learn them from your coach. And by repetitions, I'm talking about really slow in the beginning, because in the beginning, you're not going to be able to go super fast, right? Because you don't have the muscle memory developed yet. You don't have all the information you need. A lot of times in the beginning, I think one of the most important things to search for is to figure out what it feels like to do the technique correctly. So, for instance, if you're doing a choke, to know what that choke feels like to actually do it where you're choking the person correctly. If you're doing an arm bar, making sure that you know exactly what it feels like to know what it feels like when you have the arm bar caught and the person's forced to tap. If you try to speed up the reps too early, you'll miss out on this intuition, this feeling that you got to gain for it. That early phase of like learning a technique for the first time, it should be focused on what does this feel like? And once you find the feeling of that particular technique, when it's hit at least correctly, and again, you'll improve it as time goes on, but you're starting with at least someplace. The person says, I'm choking them. That'll work for now. My coach says the armbar looks good. That's what I'm going to feel for, at least for right now. But if you ignore this, then what ends up happening is you never get a good destination of where you're supposed to go. So for instance, going back to car stuff, if you have the destination, you can pop that into your maps app and you know exactly where you're supposed to go. But if you don't have the destination and someone says, "Hey, I need you to drive somewhere," you're going to go around aimlessly. And this happens a lot of times with techniques. If you don't know what it feels like, you really don't know where your destination is. And you're going to be trying to figure that stuff out on the fly. You're going to be figuring out while this person's resisting. You need to know whether or not the technique's caught or not, so that you can then let go or continue to fight with it. A lot of times when you look at, like, for instance, you have a really good collar choke with the loop choke. You know very well whether or not that choke is caught almost as soon as it's on. You know whether or not to chase it or to let it go or to continue, mess with it, right? And I think that starts early when you start by trying to find the right feeling of the technique.
Yeah. And I think like the one point that you made that's really important is doing it properly, like having the proper knowledge and the positioning and just knowing this is what a rear naked choke should feel like. Or this is where the positioning should be, or an arm bar, this is where I should feel the pressure. This is how I should have my legs positioned. That's really key, because and going slowly, sometimes the mistake that we'll see in drilling with white belts is they try to do it fast. They try to do it at a faster speed, and it's sloppy. So slower, keeping it smooth, and just knowing exactly what ideally what it will feel like and what it should feel like. I think that's really important. Getting the proper technique and information is I think, like, that sets you up for success.
Nice. Very much so. And then the second stage, very simple. So now you have a technique that you know the feeling, you've done it properly. Now you've got to develop the ability to hit that technique more quickly during a roll, and using it. Because again, when we talk about jiu-jitsu, we're very focused on execution and being able to use it in live conditions. So essentially, the way that I think of it is you've got to shorten the lag time down between recognizing the technique is available and then executing on that. The faster you do that, the harder it is for your partner to defend, and the more successful you'll be. Ways to increase your ability with that technique to sharpen it up is, one, good old fashioned drilling with repetitions. You have to be careful because a lot of people, just as a sort of aside, a lot of people waste a lot of time when they drill. Most techniques have a particular portion of them that is the most crucial for its execution. And so a lot of times when I'm developing drills, I'm trying to find, like, what's the most important, like, what is the important part that I'm trying to get out of the technique and turn that into a drill. So a lot of times you won't do the full technique. You might just do a portion of the technique that's really, really important. For those of you that follow me on YouTube, the shotgun armbar. We're practicing the shotgun armbar in the gym right now because I'm going through it again with everybody. And the drill for that move is being in side control with the whole move set up and then swinging your leg around as your knee sits back and just doing that over and over again, because that's the hardest part. Once you get the grips, being able to pull the trigger on the technique before your opponent's able to respond. And so we'll do that over and over again and try to get lots and lots of reps from that position. And so again, with your drilling, if you can't drill the technique very fast, and when I mean fast, I don't necessarily mean super quick. I mean fast relative to you, because again, you want to make sure that your drilling is smooth, but you want to be able to do it in a fairly quick motion. Boom, 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 boom. Like, for instance, one of our guys does triangles. He's got an incredible triangle, finishes a lot of people with it. When he's drilling his triangle, he's drilling like the end of it, the catch, where basically he's kicking off to the side, throwing his legs up over top, and then back down. He's not going through the whole thing, finishing the submission and everything else. He's just getting that catch, boom, 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 over and over and over again. The other thing that you can then begin to do, along with the repetitions, if that's available to you, is begin to focus on it during rolling. Now, this is tough because you've got to remember that when you're in this early stage, you're using a lot of energy. Your gains are very inconsistent and slow at best. And you're probably going to mess up a lot, and people are going to probably make you pay for that. That's okay. That's like what is the old adage? You got to crack a few eggs to make an omelet. You're going to have to fail a bit. You're going to have to screw up a little bit to really make this thing happen. So, but be okay with it. And you need to focus on it during rolling. The best strategy that I can give you for that is, if you are at least somewhat more experienced than someone in your gym on some level, go with that person that's less experienced than you and then practice on them using that technique. We had Henry Akins on the podcast recently, and he was talking about how Rickson Gracie, that was the way he trained a lot of times, was he would roll and he would be hitting everybody with the same move. That was what he was working on, right? You talk to any black belt and you'll hear that same story being told, where they find the best way to train themselves is to, I'm going to use this technique over and over again. Bernardo Faria was on the podcast, a couple of years ago, about a year ago, something like that. It's been a long time. We've had a lot of people on. And Bernardo was talking about the fact that he did not like to drill techniques and do repetitions, but what he loved doing was trying to use a technique over and over and over again against the people he was rolling with. So, if he's rolling with someone, he's only going to use that one technique, and he's going to limit himself in order to get better with it.
And the one thing, the finishing is very important, the mechanics and all that. And we're going to kind of go backwards a little bit. A lot of times most people get, once they get like I have a choke that if I sink that in, I know it's in, but it's how do I disguise it? How do I set it up? And with Bernardo, with the omoplata, he had setups, for the omoplata from many different positions and many different ways. You have setups to get to that truck position from a lot of different ways. And it always, it starts with the grips, right? It starts with those grips. You develop your entries and your varying grips. And even going back to that shotgun armbar, when you were teaching that, you've taught it before in one way. And then you said to it, well, watch this hand position, this change of a position of the hands. It disguises as something else. It makes somebody worry about a different position altogether, a different submission altogether, and allows you, it gets the reaction you want to finish the move.
Yeah. Now, and see, that's where that's on my third step. So when I think about the way that I do techniques, so in the beginning, I just pick one way to do it and just get it done. And then after I get going, and this is something that all of us will run into. If you've run into this in the gym, where you start using a technique, it's going really well for you, you're hitting everybody. Everybody's like, damn it. Eugene's got that damn thing or whatever, that damn move, or Bob's been hitting me with that damn arm bar from that position. Okay. So what do you do then? Do you just give up on it? Do you just say like, all right, well, this isn't working anymore? If you're smart, you won't give up on it. Instead, what you'll think about doing is adding a little bit of deception into your game. And so this is kind of what Eugene was talking about, where at that point, you've got to change things up. I wrote an email about this once, and I included the Sun Tzu quote, which says, quote, all warfare is based on deception. Hence, when we are able to attack, we must seem unable. When using our forces, we must appear inactive. When we are near, we must make the enemy believe we are far away. And when far away, we must make the enemy believe we are near. And so, granted, you're not fighting, it's not warfare or anything like that, but the idea of adding deception and trying to disguise what you're doing is a very useful and practical thing for jiu-jitsu. One of the easiest ways to add a little deception to your game is by, like Eugene was saying, changing the grips up. So here's an example. My shotgun armbar. And again, if you guys follow me on YouTube, you'll have seen this in action, because I was talking about this a bunch. When I was using that armbar, all of a sudden, everybody in the gym knew that I was doing it. I mean, they were just like, all right, Chewy, enough's enough. Because, I mean, there were some days where I would roll with guys, and I was so hyper-focused on that armbar, I might use it like, I remember one of the guys on the team, great dude, he came in, I think I hit him on it 6 times. He's from the team, he's a brown belt, he's a really great guy, tough as can be. I hit him with that armbar 6 times. He was so frustrated. He's like, damn it, Well, what happens is when you start using a technique that much, people start to notice. They're like, okay, so I need to defend this particular technique. Okay. So then you got to figure out a way to sort of throw them off the scent. And so then I started to figure out different ways. And so I started adding in a paper cutter choke to get them to think about the choke. Then they started noticing that I wasn't really going for the paper cutter. So then one of my best ways of actually getting the armbar, which is from side control, is I'll start from the back, and I'll essentially let the person feel like they're escaping. And as they're escaping, I have a little grip that I'll use, and the grip it's a false grip, so they don't actually feel anything on their arm, and I'll come up and get it. And that's another thing too, is recognizing the parts of the body that are hypersensitive. So for instance, if I grab someone's tricep they instantly know it's an arm. They know something's going on. We don't grab triceps in jiu-jitsu for no reason. And so if you're on the ground and you're grabbing a tricep, you're probably trying to do an arm lock. And so when you grab someone's tricep, they instantly become more resistant. Whereas I can go a little bit deeper sometimes and start on their shoulder and use the grip on the shoulder to hold the arm in place so they can't move. And then when I'm ready to go, I'll just slide down to the tricep. Or when I go for like back chokes from back mount, I have my choking arm, the arm, like if you have a seatbelt, the grip that's over top, I will take that arm out completely to the point where the hand's resting over on the side of their shoulder, but not under their neck.
Yeah.
And I'll find that people a lot of times don't protect their neck as much. But if I leave that arm in front of their neck or dangling next to their neck where they have the sensation of having an arm pressed against their neck, they're way more aware of it. And so another key to making your techniques unstoppable, and I think this is probably one of the most important keys, is once you have a technique that's working for you, expect it to get stopped. It's going to happen. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And then when that happens, don't throw your hands up in the air and say, man, this isn't working anymore. I'm done with this stupid thing. Instead, figure out multiple ways to get there. And going back to Bernardo with his omoplata, Bernardo came to our gym back in 2016. And this was, I think, right around the time he released his like Omoplata Anywhere DVD.
Yeah, Omoplata Everyone, I think is what it was.
And so what does he do? He omoplatas almost everyone in our gym. He didn't get me an omoplata. He got me in something else. But he omoplated almost everybody else in the gym. I mean, and it was so funny because everybody knew about his DVD that he had released, or his series that he released. And then he's like showing them, see, I can omoplata all you guys. And part of the reason why he could do that is because he had a bazillion different setups. So whether he was on top or bottom or wherever he had ways to get there. And that, in my estimation, is one of the best things to do for your game. Is once you find a technique that really works for you, instead of trying to find a new shiny object to go chase, find more ways to connect that technique to more positions. Because the more ways that you can find your way back to that one position that you're really good at, that in itself, that's what, if you watch a lot of good grapplers, that's what they do. They get one area of their game really, really, really developed, and then they find a million different ways to get back there.
Yeah, I agree. I think like that is too. It's so important because then you have to just kind of defend. You have to learn to kind of all these different. You're getting there, and once you get there, you're so good at it. And so, like for example, the omoplata. So it's just getting there. Sometimes the hard part's getting there. So you have to almost like reverse engineer. Like, right, what's stopping? What's my roadblock here? What's stopping me? Reverse engineer it. And another thing maybe we didn't mention is the timing. You know, when with some of your setups, Chewy, I always talk to you about when you and I roll. The issue is the grips, like your speed with the grips, meaning like, you know, I'm going to grip this way and I'm going to anticipate a reaction, and then I'm going to grip that way, and that type of thing, right? And so I think with having good timing there as well. Like, so you know that your setup relies on grips. So you're going to start with these grips. You're going to expect a certain reaction and have varying grips to get into the same thing. Like the shotgun armbar. You have a different, instead of grabbing the tricep, you're grabbing at the shoulder, or even you're grabbing the lapel in some cases, because you're threatening a different submission, like a decoy. So, yeah, I think there's quite a few elements, but let me ask you this: if you find that like maybe a certain position for you, like the shotgun armbar, no longer working, what was your like process of like reverse engineering? Like, were you just like just looking at the rolls? Were you just like taking notes? Like, how did you maybe solve that problem if you did find a roadblock?
I didn't give myself a choice, and this is what I do. This is like so if you run into the snag, you cannot give yourself an out. What tends to happen is once something doesn't work anymore, people just give up on it very quickly, and they just stop. You know, they just say, it's not working anymore. Done with it. Right. It's like people in relationships, you know, like everything starts off great, and then as soon as you hit a little snag and things aren't easy, you just want to give up.
Yeah.
Because it's easy. It's instead of saying, well, I need to work this shit out. It's the same thing there with your technique, right? So like instead of simply just saying, oh, it's not working anymore, it's not easy. Well, then you just got to find your ways to do it. Now, there's a neat thing, and I believe in this, that the subconscious will figure things out if you demand it to. So for instance, if you're rolling with someone and let's say, and this is what I would do, I would not allow myself to use any other submission during this time period. So if I was going to submit someone, I had to do it with that submission. And so that was it. And so basically, when all you were thinking about is how to find this thing, right? How to get to this one thing, you will find a way to get there. You can think about the way that sometimes people misinterpret news, scientific studies, or whatever. Like they have those scientists that, in times past have been paid by major corporations to make their companies look good. The corporation will come to them and say, hey, we need you to make the data look like X equals Y, right? Because we don't want our product to look bad in the marketplace. And so these scientists get paid some money. They did this with sugar, right? So this was it's the classic example. It's not the only one. Happens a lot. A really good book, if you guys haven't read it before, is called Manufacturing Consent. They talk about this and how they talk about like how propaganda news gets into this.
Yeah.
I'll digress. But basically, so it's a good book though. But I'll digress. But you get into it, and so they say, okay, like they know what they're looking for before they even start the study. So then all they have to do is continue to manipulate the variables and the way that they present the data and the way that they use the experiments to find the outcome that they're looking for. Like, because the company comes to the person and says, hey, we have this chemical, or we have this thing, and we want you to make this not look so bad. So go ahead and make the study happen a certain way so that it supports what we want. And then, the company puts a bunch of money into backing it up and pushing it out in the news. And then we believe it, right? Well, so with that said, the same thing, you can use that same approach to some degree with your training, where I'm reaching on that one, aren't I? But with your own training, because what you can do is you know what you want to happen. You want the particular technique. Okay, make that happen. Right? Like, just like the scientist who's getting paid X amount of dollars from the corporation is going to find, he's not going to bring them the study that says, hey, by the way, this chemical's killing everyone. Right? They're going to say, no, everything's fine. Like, cigarettes are fine. There's no problem with cigarettes. Like, it's great. Right? All this like nicotine and tar and all these formaldehydes, that's okay. It's no biggie.
No problem.
It's not causing cancer at all. It's recommended by doctors after all.
That's right.
But so they're going to make it happen a certain way. So for you, if you force yourself to do it, it's not fun all the time, because there's going to be days where you're going to like not do as well as you would like. But the beautiful part is if you do it long term, you will start to figure out new ways of making those techniques happen. And the more you do this sort of exercise, the better you get at it, because essentially what happens is you then have to start becoming very resourceful and start drawing on everything that you have in jiu-jitsu knowledge wise. You have to start thinking about like different positions and techniques and like, how can I possibly get to this thing? And sometimes you might even, let's say for instance, if it's like let's say if you got really good at a triangle and nobody would like want to play on top, they'd always pull guard on you, right? Well, then you could start to like pass their guard and get to mount, and then like pull like roll, let them escape mount, and then let them roll on top of you, and then get the guard, right? So you could use that as an example, basically, to get there in some really long-winded way.
That's exactly what I do with Matt and his triangles. I remember like initially, and this now, if we ever roll, I don't get on top of him, or I'm like literally just right away. So that's so funny you say that, because I'll do that sometimes if somebody's got a really strong position, and so use that to your advantage if you anticipate people doing that for you. Like, somebody, if you expect somebody to pull guard and all of a sudden, or they expect you to pull guard, and then you take them down and then go work, then you have a whole other avenue to get there, right? A whole other way. I mean, as far as triangles go, I mean, there's so many different ways to get it, from mount, even side control. So there's just a lot of ways to do it.
Yeah, like there was so in the gym we do this drill sometimes where I'll tell the students, I'll divide them in groups and I'll give them a particular technical restriction. So I might say to you, you can use rear naked chokes and arm bars, or you can use leg locks and arm locks, and you can only use submissions that start from the bottom positions.
Yep.
And with that last one, that's kind of funny because like whenever like if I do the drill with them, whenever I'm the guy that can only do submissions from the bottom, what I will do is I'll start attacking top and I'll threaten stuff from the top. So this way they don't know that that's a possibility, right? So like I'll start like grabbing kimuras and stuff like that. I'll get them thinking, right? And then what I'll do is then I'll put them in a position where they can come up on top of me and like escape. And as they come up on top of me, then I'll go for my attack.
You sneaky fella.
And so you can do that on a regular basis though, you know? So again, like you can find really tricky ways to get into positions and disguise your stuff, whether it be the grips, disguise your entries, all these different things. And again, over time, the more you use a technique through drilling and through rolling, the better the timing is going to become. You're going to over time develop that timing where you got it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And then, yeah, just starting slow, like you said, like starting just really learn, like try to perfect the technique, and then you know start to kind of use it in training and practice, and then you know then you'll find that I think that the mastery comes when you do reach the roadblocks. That's when you start looking at the mastery. Once you reach the roadblocks and you force yourself to work around it, that's when kind of the mastery, then the position becomes, you know, unstoppable. And
right.
It's good because so I guess like maybe a way to think about it is just to even look forward to those roadblocks.
Well, I mean, and this is the thing, all of us, this is like a jiu-jitsu sort of philosophy that you can take on and off the mat with you, right? Every one of us is going to face roadblocks when we're training. Every one of us is going to face obstacles when we're off the mats and just in life, right?
Yes.
It's in jiu-jitsu, we understand it's not about the obstacles that you face, but how you face them, right? That's what really matters. It's how you decide to pick up and face that obstacle in front of you. Do you fold? Do you continue to push through? Like, how do you react to it? Because we all know we're going to go through some stuff. And it's how we respond to that stuff that truly, truly matters. You know, one of I've had like just here's an example that isn't necessarily focused on training jiu-jitsu. I've had some really good sized failures, especially early on in regards to the business. Where had these big grand goals and ideas, whatever, and then had complete flops business wise, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of times those things led to big improvements and big successes later on because of how I responded to them.
Right.
Likewise, with all of my best techniques, every one of them came about because of an obstacle. For instance, going back to the back take that we were talking about earlier to the truck, that was a response to several of the jiu-jitsu players that I was training with who were really good at turtling and then getting back to guard and regarding before I was able to take their back, right? I felt like I was playing putt golf and they were the windmill and the little windmills like in front of the hole. And that windmill was it was spinning too fast for me. And so I had to change the way that I went for the back take. And what ended up happening was I found a technique that's become one of my best techniques ever because of how I responded, because I didn't say, you know what, I'm going to give up on the back take. I said, no, I'm going to figure out how to take their back. I have to find a way. Right. And so how you respond to those obstacles will determine how well you're going to get in jiu-jitsu, but it'll also determine how good you're going to get with all this stuff. And I think in a lot of cases, it determines pretty much everything for you, because we're all going to face the problems and obstacles. So how do you face those problems and obstacles? Do you fold, or do you, basically dust yourself off and you keep going and you figure out a way?
No, I agree. It's and I think you're going to constantly see those things and deal with those things in jiu-jitsu and in life, like you said. And I think after a while you expect them. Like after you've been in jiu-jitsu long enough, I think you do expect those the obstacles to be there, because like people get, once you start doing a technique over and over, people adapt and they learn how to defend it. And so you have to learn how to attack it from a different way.
Absolutely. And again, that's it. That's it. And again, this episode's not super long. And it's not super complicated either. But from talking with numerous other black belts, world champions, coaches, things like that, what you guys have right here is like, it's the guts, it's the bones of really developing amazing techniques. Um, Again, it's not complicated because it doesn't have to be. What it lacks in sort of overall complexity and having all kinds of different stuff going on, what it lacks in that, it makes up for in the difficulty that you will face when you try to actually execute the ideas.
Yeah.
And again, coaches can facilitate this process through situational rolling and things like that, which is very nice. But even if for some reason that's not a possibility because your coach doesn't do those types of things, you can take it upon yourself to make it happen. So I hope this episode is helpful to you guys. All right, guys. So I hope you enjoyed the podcast today. I want to give a quick shout out to a guy on Reddit. So
Okay.
he posted up this message, and it was very nice. I appreciate it. It's always interesting on Reddit because Reddit can be it can, it can be a really interesting place.
Reddit can be a bitch.
It can be, but you know what? Everybody on Reddit's been generally pretty good to me.
Yeah.
There's some people that don't like me there, but that I don't really care that much because it's 99% positive. And some of the messages that I saw in this post were really cool.
Awesome.
But I wanted to read it off because again, I wanted him to know because he said he listens to the podcast that I saw it and I appreciate you. So his Reddit handle is love LUV myself first. And he says, Chewy from Jiu-Jitsu is an inspiration on and off the mats. He said, I don't want to sound like I'm kissing his ass too much, but I have to say that Chewy has been such an inspiration for me in BJ and in life. I listen to his podcast and he just inspires me and gives me a hope in life. The way he lives his life is admirable. He's like a modern samurai warrior. It makes me want to emulate him. I know there's an obsession with like samurais. Samurais were not the nicest dudes in the world. If you go look up the history, like there's this like romanticism with them. Is like they were these like these Zen like warriors, you know. But like those dudes would like just go kill peasants to test their sharpness of their swords and stuff. I mean, they were rowdy folks. I mean, it's just like
Chewy, the white belts are your peasants.
It was the feudal knights in like in European civilization, right, where they'd run around and like we have that romanticism of chivalry and everything else, and meanwhile they're like terrorizing the peasants and the farmers. History nerd stuff, right? But he said prior to listening to his podcast, I was already doing BJJ, but I was drifting aimlessly in life, and it's because of him that I am now setting goals and accomplishing them. It really has given me more meaning in my life. If he's reading this, I just want to say thanks. Sorry if this post was too gay or emotional. I'm glad we have people in our martial like him in our martial arts. So, brother, I appreciate you, and I am listening. So I saw it. And I appreciate it. Again, I'm glad that you've got something from the podcast. I'm glad it's helped you out on and off the mat. I mean, that's kind of the goal. We tend to try to figure out a way whenever we do the podcast to try to give you guys something that you can use, right? Whether it be training, whether it be something off the mats, we try to give you some ideas to use, some ideas to chew on, and give you some tools and techniques that you can implement. So this way, it's both us entertaining you to some degree, but then you get to walk away with some other stuff. And also, thanks to the rest of the people that commented, there were some funny ones in there. So appreciate you guys. So yeah, guys, that was the podcast. So hopefully, this will help you take away some ideas on how to develop stronger techniques. And again, this is the process that, again, if you go back and really listen to some of the podcasts we had with other guests, when they talk about their development of techniques, most of the things that we've talked about are in place with those. Yeah. And so again, it's one of these things where I've talked to so many black belts over the years, and you just find that we're all kind of doing the same stuff. It's like we all end up on the same road one way or the other. So again, hopefully the podcast was helpful today, guys. As always, thanks to our sponsors. Charlotte's Web, charlottesweb.com/Chewjitsu, CHEWJITSU. If you guys want to support the podcast and you're getting Charlotte's Web, that's the way to do it right now. They changed a few things on their website. So make sure that if you guys want to get some CBD products from Charlotte's Web, whether that's their tinctures, their gummies, their balms, any of that stuff, again, to help you out with your recovery, to fight off some of the inflammation in your body after your training and getting those grueling jiu-jitsu rounds in, they've got some amazing products for that. But again, check them out. But you just got to make sure that you go to charlottesweb.com/Chewjitsu if you're trying to support the podcast with it. And again, if you've never used CBD products, I encourage you to check it out. There's some interesting data that I was reading about recently where apparently, and again, CBD is very much a sedative for me. Like it makes me just want to go to sleep and relax. Like it's very helpful for that. but for some people it's a stimulant. For some people, they found that for some people, if they use certain dosages, it actually like kind of keeps them awake.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, well, this is like when we were talking to the people at Charlotte's Web. Some of them use it for like work. They'll use a dose of CBD before they get ready to do some deep work. Me, if I use CBD before deep work, I'm just going to get some deep sleep. Like, I mean, that's what's going to happen. Not going to get much work done. But with that, some people have a response to it. It's a really interesting thing about the way the endocannabinoid system works, where people can take the same medicine and have a different reaction.
Yep.
I mean, even heck, some people can take things like Benadryl, which is like an antihistamine that for the most part knocks people out.
Yeah.
And some people have the opposite reaction, wakes them up. So go figure.
Yeah.
So again, check it out. And again, I encourage you to try it out and use it for a month to see the results that you have with it. Because again, it takes a little bit to get in your system. And I think after a little bit, you'll kind of get a good read as to how it affects you or not. And also thanks to our sponsor, Epic Roll. Epic Roll. BJJ.com is the website. Promo code is Jiu-Jitsu to save 15% on an order. You can get the shorts, the rash guards, the gis, the t-shirts, whatever it is that you're looking for right now. Check him out. I really like his stuff. I think he has cool designs. I think he has good looking gear that fits well and is also very comfortable and is high quality. So if any of that kind of stuff sounds good to you, check him out. Again, we just finished up an order recently with a set of custom rash guards and shorts, which we'll be doing another one probably in the summer. Kind of keep an eye on that. Mm-hmm. And with that, when we did that, the reason why I was comfortable doing that is because I like his stuff. Just like when I did the gi launch with Origin, I like Origin stuff. Like I'm doing it. And Matt, I love his no-gi stuff. I love his shorts. I love the fit of his rash guards. And so I wanted to do one. So that was, I'm willing to put my stamp of approval, my bearded stamp of approval on that. So again, if you guys want to check out any of his stuff, go to epicrollbjj.com. Promo code is Jiu-Jitsu.
I think part of it too is supporting good people. You know, like I think
100%.
Matt's a cool dude, and you know, Pete's a good dude from Origin, and it's just awesome to like have actually like good people, like good leaders of those respective companies, and like they just like support the community, which is really awesome. Support people that support you.
I like supporting people that are like legit trying to support like the community. They're actually trying to add something to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, because there's a lot of companies, and maybe some of you guys may not be, you know, privy to this, but there's a lot of like companies that will just make crap. Like they'll just pop up, you know, and they literally have nothing to do with jiu-jitsu. They'll just come up with a logo. They'll find a place over in, you know, one of the stands that makes, makes the gear. And they'll just basically say, yeah, whatever, this is a jiu-jitsu gi or something. Just buy it. You know, there's one company, in fact, I'm thinking about, where they were making a big push. They were trying to sponsor people, whatever, and they were not people from the jiu-jitsu community. They ended up screwing a lot of people over. Whereas Matt and guys like Pete at Origin and Matt at Epic Roll, those dudes are like, they're dudes in the jiu-jitsu community. Like if you go look at like Matt's his Instagram, you will see pictures of him training on the regular basis, right? I've rolled with him. He's a legit dude. So with people like that, that's what I want to do. Those are the kind of people that I want to support. Because I feel like it's for the jiu-jitsu community, from the jiu-jitsu community.
Right.
It's not someone that's coming in and being like, here's a way to make a couple of bucks. Like the guy actually puts a lot of work into his stuff, and it comes through in the designs, it comes through in the workmanship and everything else that he tries to put together from his designs and everything else that's available to him. So again, that's why I support him. And that's why I'm passionate about that kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure.
And also, guys, again, if you listen to this episode and you'd like to go a little bit deeper with some of the ideas, again, I talked about it at the beginning of the podcast. I have an ebook. It's called Focused Jiu-Jitsu. I give it away for free by joining my email list. So if you go to jujitsu.net/join, JOIN, if you do that, you go to my website, join up on the email list. You'll then get access to 2 free ebooks, which one of them is the Focused Jiu-Jitsu book, which has basically, it just gives you a set of drilling strategies and tactics that you can use and implement in your training to take a technique from learning it for the very first time, where it's all sloppy and unreliable, to being able to use it against a resisting opponent of similar skill level during a roll. That's kind of the idea with it. and I break it down for you within that ebook. And so you can see kind of how I would do it. And it'd be a great, like, sort of compliment to what we just did. Now, you do join my email list. When you do that, I send out an email generally once a day. The email, I'll just give you a fair warning. The email is a mixture of things. It could be everything from me talking about jiu-jitsu ideas, me sharing some random books that I'm reading, me making fun of some troll on the internet. And I also do talk about the products that I offer and sell on my website. If me making any kind of money bothers you, don't join the email list. I've heard people say, like, Chewy, like, why are you telling me about this product or whatever? I'm like, well, that's what I do. Like I'm having fun with it, and I'm trying to entertain you. But at the same time, it's just like when we do commercials for the podcast. It's just like when you watch TV shows and there's commercials. It's just like when you like go to an event and it says sponsored by so-and-so. It's just like, that's just how things work. If I could do it for free, I definitely would. But
Man, support people that
I gotta
you
eat.
like, you know what I mean? Yeah, dude. But like, the thing is I always enjoy your emails, man. I've been reading them forever. I always enjoy them. And, a lot of times I can see you speaking through the email. Like yeah, we've had this conversation or this concept we've talked about. It's usually pretty valuable. It's kind of like, when we were talking about the podcast, you try to give like some type of nugget of information, something to chew on, as you say. And with the podcast, going back to that, man, that's one of the most rewarding things, is like getting messages and hear from people that like it just helps their day out, or it gives them a little extra motivation or inspiration to do something. And so, I mean, that's kind of for us too as well. I think like that's something cool.
Yeah, like today, like the email today was about how to, if you're going to lift and do jiu-jitsu in the same day, I give 3 different tips on how to do that effectively. If you have to do them on the same day. And then the other one that I had, like, actually, there was another one the other day that was, we dove into some really good tips on how to, like, about grip fighting, and again, so there's really good tips on it. And sometimes, like I said, sometimes it's just me being silly. I do a lot of silly stuff on there. So check it out. Also, guys, if you want to support the podcast directly, you have a few different ways you can do it. If you're listening to the podcast on some sort of application that then has an option for you to rate or review or give some like stars to it or whatever it is. I don't know all the applications anymore. There's so many. We would appreciate a review, a comment, some stars or whatever, something positive.
We'll read one. We can read one at the next one.
If you're listening to us this far, right, like you've enjoyed the podcast, so we'd appreciate it. And again, it shouldn't take too long to do that. You can also join our Patreon, which is patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. With that membership, you'll get access to a sort of backlog of extra episodes that we've done with different guests, sometimes with just you and me and Eugene, again, sharing ideas, sharing little nuggets of information, along with some videos and different content that's not released anywhere else. In addition to all that, we also do a green room once a month, where basically this is Eugene and me hanging out, chatting. So if you've ever wanted to like hang out and chat with me and Eugene in a very casual format, and you don't have the ability to train with us in the gym, this is probably like the next best thing. So you can join up to the green room before the podcast. We'll put it out well in advance so that you can know that it's coming up. And afterwards, you join in, hang out with us. We'll just have a lighthearted conversation and chat with you. If you have questions, you can ask them for sure. And then that's that. So again, if you guys want to get access to that, you can do so by going to patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. So guys, hopefully you enjoyed the podcast. Hopefully you got something from it. Appreciate you. We'll talk to you next week.